You didn't fail your diet. Your diet was designed to fail you. Teams of scientists hired by some of the biggest corporations on the planet spent decades figuring out exactly how your brain responds to sugar, salt, and fat. Not to feed you, to hook you. And the craziest part? The people who perfected this weren't even food companies. They were cigarette companies.
Food industry and the processed food industry was created by the cigarette industry. So in the 1990s, the two largest food companies in the world were R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris. What happened is when the Surgeon General way too late in the 1980s said cigarettes were maybe problematic, these were some of the largest companies in the world with the largest cash piles of any company in the world. So what they did is they used their cash piles to buy food companies. We think about the 80s as the Wall Street era M&A, a lot of deals. The two biggest M&A deals up until 1990 in world history were cigarette companies buying food companies. So you had in the 90s, these two cigarette companies very strategically do two things. They shifted their thousands of scientists who were experts at making cigarettes addictive to the food department. So we had the rise of ultra-processed food where our food now is a science experiment. The second thing they did is they created the food pyramid. So the cigarette industry, through the food companies they bought, paid off the FDA, the USDA, Harvard to create reports saying sugar doesn't cause obesity. And they lobbied for the food pyramid in the 1990s, we all remember, which said, animal-based fats are bad, carbs are good. Remember, carbs and sugar were basically the base of the pyramid. And that shifted. And you look at dietary patterns. Today, a child diet is 70% ultra-processed food. Now, what does that mean? Those are literally foods invented by the cigarette industry to addict kids.
But something's happening right now that's starting to undo all of it. And they're terrified. In 1969, a guy called Howard Moskowitz, a psychophysicist from Harvard University with a PhD, got hired by the US Army. His job was simple: go to the Natick research labs in Massachusetts and figure out why soldiers weren't eating their rations. What he discovered was anything but simple. He found that for any given flavor, there's one specific concentration where people want it the most. Not too sweet, not too bland. There's that point where the brain lights up and says more. He called it the Bliss Point.
I said, I think you can make a better pasta sauce. Let's make different combinations. And we ended up creating 45 dishes. And we got people to taste them and rate them. I realized that if you systematically varied the ingredients and you tested them, nature would reveal itself in stunning clarity. So this is the origin of the bliss point with which I am identified. The easiest way to demonstrate a bliss point is add sugar to coffee. As you add more and more sugar, you like it more and more up to a certain point, and then you like it less and less. The highest level is where you like it most. That's where you have the bliss.
Now here's where it gets dark. The food industry noticed. They hired him. And over the next 20 years, Moskowitz optimized some of the most consumed products in America. Prego, pasta sauce, Dr. Pepper, Diet Pepsi. He wasn't making food that tasted good. He was making food you couldn't stop eating. There's a difference. If this is already changing how you think about what's in your kitchen, hit subscribe and like, because it gets a lot worse from here. Salt has a bliss point, fat has a bliss point. Stack all three together in the right ratio and your brain's dopamine system, the exact same rewards circuit that lights up with cocaine, fires over and over again. The industry's word for this is hyperpatability. What that actually means in plain English is they engineered addiction into your food, but the bliss point is only half the story. In 1985, Philip Morris, the cigarette company, bought General Foods for $5.6 billion. In 1988, they bought Kraft for $12.9 billion. Same year, R.J. Reynolds, another tobacco giant, merged with Nabisco. Think about that for a second. The companies that spent decades making cigarettes as addictive as possible were now in charge of Oreos, Kraft Mac and Cheese, Lunchables, Ritz Crackers.
Have you had Casey and Callie Means on?
They're coming on. Yeah.
They're coming on.
Yeah.
They have an incredible story. What they say is in the 80s, when you had these mergers, one of the mega mergers that happened was tobacco company with food company. There was two of them. And a lot of the scientists started to focus some of their energy on taking that skill, I'll just put that in quotes, of making something very addictive and transposing it to food, right? It's like, okay, if I'm at RJR and I'm used to making cigarettes, how do I think about structurally building up something that wants you to eat more, but now instead of smoking, instead of a cigarette, it's a Twinkie or whatever. And a lot of the food science that we have in America is built on the back of a bunch of these mega mergers where you had these scientists go and build super quote unquote addictive food.
Yeah.
And that was a failure of I mean, obviously it was a failure of the capital markets, but it was a failure of public health.
You gotta tell me that's not just a little bit crazy. And they didn't just sit there collecting profits. A study from the University of Kansas published in 2023 in the journal Addiction found that during the years tobacco companies owned these food brands from 1988 to 2001, they selectively increased the number of high-palatable products hitting the shelves. They took what they knew about hooking people on nicotine and applied it to your food. That's not speculation, that's published, peer-reviewed research. And there's another trick that almost nobody talks about, vanishing caloric density. A food scientist called Stephen Witherly figured this out. Some snacks, Cheetos being the most studied example, which I really enjoy, of course, Cheetos are yummy, built to dissolve in your mouth almost instantly. Your brain gets the hit of fat and salt and crunch, but the food disappears before your stomach can register that you've eaten anything. So your brain never sends the signal to stop.
Cheetos are the perfect food. Now I'm going to get some flack for this, mostly from people who didn't watch the next 10 seconds of the video, but they really are the perfect food and an absolute marvel of food engineering. I read an article recently about this and it blew my mind. There's a couple really important takeaways for us. One is just to understand the money and the energy that goes into manipulating how we experience food. And number two, consciously shaping our food habits so that we're eating foods that do less of what I'm about to describe to you. So how are Cheetos the perfect food? So first, Cheetos have something built into them called vanishing caloric density. This is on purpose. The scientists who created Cheetos wanted you to feel a vanishing effect. When you crunch and compress the Cheeto, it basically tricks your brain into thinking you've eaten less than you actually have, so you're more likely to keep eating them. Number two, Cheetos have sensory specific manipulation, meaning they're a perfect combination of crunchiness, saltiness, and even colors that ignite every part of your taste buds and your overall food enjoying experience. And number three, which is much like number two, is called Bliss Point engineering. This essentially means that the engineers have maximized the combination of all the variables to produce the most possible pleasure from eating the food. So obviously, you're going to be more likely to eat more of them and buy them again. And number four is stomach expansion and satiety delay. Because of the way Cheetos collapse and their kind of empty nutritional content, there's a delayed fullness effect, which means by the time you're full, you've probably eaten way too much. So Cheetos really are an engineering marvel. It's amazing how many levers they're pulling on us to get us to eat more of them. You may not buy Cheetos. Maybe this is not on your radar, but again, this is important to understand because there's a lot of forces at play trying to get you to do things that may not be the best for your health. And you can guide yourself by looking at the opposite. What are the foods that provide immediate satiety? What are the foods with natural flavorings that don't hit all the pleasure centers in your brain? Fill your plate up with 80% of these types of food so you don't find yourself falling into the traps set for us by the...
You just keep eating and eating and eating and you really just don't stop. Sounds exciting, right? You just keep reaching into the bag and reaching until it's empty and you're wondering what happened. Witherly called Cheetos one of the most perfectly constructed foods on the planet in terms of pure pleasure. He wasn't praising them, he was warning you. Then you've got Robert Lustig, neuroendocrinologist. I swear to you, I don't know if I pronounced that right, but I gave it a try. At UCSF, who spent his entire career mapping what ultra-processed food does to your hormones. Insulin spikes, leptin, the hormones that's supposed to tell your brain you're full, gets blocked. The off switch in your brain stops working, not as a side effect, but they're trying to get you hooked. The product is literally doing exactly what it was built to do. You hooked, get your mind hooked, get your body hooked, and everything else goes downhill. I'm speaking from experience. So that's the system. Bliss Point, vanishing calories, broken hormones, tobacco playbook, all of it running in the background every time you walk down a supermarket aisle. But here's why I wanted to make this video, because for the first time, that system is cracking. Three things are happening at once. First, GLP-1 drugs, Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro. They were built for diabetes, but what they actually do is just really makes you feel like you're full all the time, consistently. Doesn't sound too bad to me, does it? Well, you tell me. Basically, before processed food, we would be able to eat food, natural food, like whole proteins, and feel full naturally. You feel satiated, you feel like you've eaten enough. But once the genetically modified, engineered food came out, that basically broke it. So essentially what the GLP drugs do is that it restores you back to when you was able to feel full naturally and not go through the bliss system. People on these drugs don't just eat less. They stop wanting the engineered stuff entirely. then cravings just switch off.
Once Ozempic is in your bloodstream, it activates the parts of the brain that make you feel full, reducing your appetite. It also stabilizes your blood sugar, stopping sudden cravings. Then it slows down how fast your stomach empties food, which keeps you feeling full for longer after a meal. This causes you to lose weight as you eat less, but it can make some people feel sick and even give them diarrhea.
A Cornell University study from December 2025 tracked what happens when someone in a household starts taking GLP-1s. Grocery spending drops about 5.5% within 6 months. Savory snacks spending drops about 10%. And as of 2025, roughly 12% of American adults have already taken one. The food industry sees what's coming. Sukarno projects that by 2030, households with GLP-1 users will account for over a third of all food and drink sales. Companies are readily scrambling, changing products, shrinking portions, launching protein snacks marketed as GLP-1 friendly. The same people who spent decades engineering addiction are now trying to sell to a customer base that can't be addicted anymore, and they have no idea how to do it. Second, regulation. Here in the UK, HFSS restrictions came into force on the 5th of January 2026. That's high fat, salt and sugar. Paid online ads for less healthy foods are now banned. TV ads for HFSS products are blocked. Between 5:30 in the morning and 9 at night, and since October 2022, junk food's been banned from checkouts and end-of-aisle displays. This Bliss Point's not illegal, but selling it just got a lot harder. Third, the numbers are out and they're horrifying. The UK, 57% of what adults eat by calorie is ultra-processed. For teenagers, it's 66%. 2/3 of a young person's daily energy comes from food that was designed in the lab to override their hunger signals. That stat is the reason everything else is happening. It's why the drugs are selling. It's why the regulation passed. And it's why a new wave of food brands are now building in the opposite direction. Real ingredients, no engineered bliss points, no vanishing caloric density tricks. For decades, we were told this was about choices, about discipline, about us. It wasn't about us. It was about chemistry, patents, and tobacco executives who understood how your brain reward systems worked better than you ever could. That system is still running. More than half the food on a UK supermarket shelf is still ultra-processed, but for the first time, the tools to break out actually exist, whether that's a drug, a law, or just finally knowing what was done to you. And knowing is where it starts. If this changed how you look at what's on your plate, subscribe and like. I want to hear from you. Here's a little challenge for you, from me, and something I'll also do. Have you ever looked at the ingredients on food you buy day to day? Have you just checked? Have you seen certain numbers like B12555 and thought to yourself, wait, what is that? If no, please do that now, or do that when you buy your next product, or check your pantry and see what foods you've bought and have a look at the ingredients and drop it in the comments. Let's break this reality together. Thank you.
For the light, a dopamine rush, a simple key to tune the mind's machinery. That stimulus is engineered to please. A subtle science brings you to your knees. A signal sent to want much more. It's what the system's always hungry for.